I thought tracking every single dollar for 90 days would finally give me peace of mind. Instead, it showed me a reality about my spending that I wasn't prepared to face. By day 60, I didn't just want to stop. I was completely broken. Here is the exact moment everything changed. It wasn't a big purchase. It wasn't a $500 dinner or a spontaneous vacation. It was a $12 charge from a coffee shop 3 blocks from my apartment on a Tuesday morning at 7:42 a.m. And when I saw that charge sitting in my spreadsheet next to 62 other charges just like it, something in me just cracked. Because I realized I wasn't tracking dollars anymore. I was tracking decisions. Hundreds of tiny decisions I had made on autopilot. Decisions that felt like nothing in the moment, but added up to something I couldn't ignore anymore. My name is Ely, and I spend way too much time thinking about how people in the U.S. experience money psychologically. If you're someone who earns a normal income, maybe even more than you used to, but still doesn't feel financially secure, hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. Because what I'm about to walk you through isn't a budgeting hack. It's the psychological trap that keeps otherwise smart, hardworking people feeling broke, even when their paycheck says they shouldn't. Here's the thing. When I started this 90-day experiment, I wasn't struggling. I was earning around $78,000 a year, which according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, puts me slightly above the median individual income in the country. I had gotten 2 raises in the past 3 years. On paper, I was doing better than most. But emotionally, I felt like I was treading water, and I wanted to know why. So I tracked every single dollar. Every coffee, every subscription, every grocery run, every Uber, every impulse buy at 11 p.m. when I couldn't sleep. I wanted data, not vibes. Now look, at first, the data was boring. Week 1 looked exactly like I expected. Rent, groceries, gas, a couple of dinners out. Nothing shocking. But by week 4, patterns started forming that I hadn't noticed before because I had never actually looked. And this is where it gets interesting. I found that I wasn't overspending on big things. I was completely fine on rent. I wasn't leasing some absurd car. I didn't have a shopping addiction. What I found instead was something the Federal Reserve has actually written about in its report on the economic well-being of U.S. households. They call it expense creep, but I think of it as invisible bleeding. Small, frequent, emotionally justified purchases that never show up as a single alarming charge, but quietly drain 15 to 20% of monthly income for a huge percentage of earners, even those making 6 figures. Here's what most people don't realize. Your brain is not built to track cumulative small losses. It's built to track single significant events. That's not a character flaw, that's neuroscience. Psychologists call this psychic numbing, and it's the same reason a single $12 coffee doesn't register as a threat, but a $400 car repair sends you into a spiral. Your nervous system is calibrated for big, obvious dangers, not for 63 small ones spread across 90 days. So when people say, "I don't know where my money goes," they're not lying, and they're not irresponsible. Their brain genuinely wasn't designed to notice this kind of leak. Now you might be thinking, okay, Ely, so just stop buying coffee, cancel a few subscriptions, problem solved. And I used to think that too. But here's where the math gets uncomfortable. Let's say you're earning $65,000 a year. After federal tax, state tax if you're in a state that has one, and FICA, you're realistically taking home somewhere around $4,100 a month. Average rent in a mid-sized American city right now sits between $1,500 and $1,900, according to recent Zillow and apartment list data. That's before utilities. Add a car payment, because the average new car payment in the U.S. has crossed $730 a month according to Experian's auto finance data. And you're already down to maybe $1,200 left for groceries, gas, insurance, healthcare costs, and literally everything else that makes up a human life. That $1,200 is supposed to cover an entire month of unpredictability. One dentist visit, one flat tire, one unexpected vet bill, and the number goes negative. This is the part that broke me during the experiment. It wasn't that I was spending irresponsibly. It's that the margin for error in a normal American income is so thin that psychological stress becomes the default state, not the exception. The American Psychological Association Stress in America survey has repeatedly found that money is the single most cited source of stress for adults, consistently above work, relationships, and even health. And I used to think that was because people were bad with money. Now I think it's because the math genuinely doesn't leave room for peace of mind, even when you're doing everything right. Here's the psychological insight that changed how I see all of this. Financial stress isn't primarily about how much you earn. It's about how much unpredictability your income can absorb. Two people making the exact same salary can experience completely different levels of anxiety depending on how thin their margin is. This is why someone earning $100,000 with a $2,800 mortgage, 2 car payments, and childcare costs can feel more financially fragile than someone earning $55,000 with no debt and a paid-off car. It was never about the number on the paycheck. It was always about the gap between income and obligation, and how much shock that gap could take before it snapped. Now this is where things got personal for me during the tracking experiment. Around day 45, I noticed something in my own spending that I didn't want to admit. A huge chunk of my small purchases weren't about hunger or convenience. They were about identity. I bought the fancier grocery brand not because it tasted meaningfully better, but because some quiet part of me needed to prove I wasn't the version of myself who used to count pennies in college. I upgraded my phone plan not because I needed the data, but because having the newest option felt like proof that I had made it. This is what behavioral economists call lifestyle inflation, but I don't think that phrase captures the real mechanism. It's not really about lifestyle. It's about self-concept. We spend to reassure ourselves of who we've become, especially after a raise, because the raise itself doesn't feel real until we can see evidence of it in our daily life. And here's the uncomfortable math behind that. Let's say you get a $10,000 raise, moving from $65,000 to $75,000. That sounds like real progress. But after taxes, that raise nets you roughly an extra $580 a month. Most people, without even consciously deciding to, will absorb somewhere between $300 and $450 of that into slightly upgraded spending. A slightly nicer apartment, a slightly newer car, a few more dinners out because we can afford it now. Which means the raise that was supposed to create breathing room actually gets swallowed by the exact psychological need it was supposed to satisfy, the feeling of having arrived. Researchers studying this pattern, including some cited in Federal Reserve consumer finance surveys, have found that the majority of income increases in middle-class households get absorbed into lifestyle costs within 12 to 18 months, leaving the actual savings rate almost unchanged. This is why so many people feel like they're running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. You earn more, but you don't feel more secure because the extra income gets converted into evidence of progress instead of into an actual buffer against instability. And the stress doesn't go away. It just becomes quieter and more confusing because now you have proof on paper that things are better, yet your body still feels like something's wrong. Here's what most people don't realize about comparison either. It's not really about wanting what other people have. It's about using other people as your only available reference point for what enough even means. If everyone around you is financing a car that costs $45,000, your own reliable 10-year-old sedan can start to feel like evidence of failure, even though it's the financially sound choice. Social comparison theory, first developed by psychologist Leon Festinger, explains that humans determine their own status not through objective measurement, but through comparison to people nearby. In the age of social media, nearby now includes strangers on the internet curating the best 5% of their financial lives. So the bar for enough keeps rising, not because your actual needs changed, but because your reference group got wider and more filtered. By day 60 of tracking, this is what actually broke me. I realized that almost none of my financial stress was coming from a lack of income. It was coming from a lack of margin, combined with a psychological need to spend in ways that proved I was doing fine. I was solving an emotional problem with financial tools, and it wasn't working because the emotional need never actually gets satisfied by another purchase. It just resets, quietly, a few days later. So what do you actually do with this? Not some extreme, unrealistic plan to live off rice and beans and never enjoy your life. Something more targeted. The first step is building what I call a shock buffer before you build a savings account in the traditional sense. Even $1,000 to $1,500 sitting untouched changes your nervous system's relationship with money because it means one flat tire or one medical copay doesn't become a full-blown crisis. This single buffer has been shown in multiple financial wellness studies to reduce reported financial anxiety more than a larger, harder-to-reach retirement goal, simply because it's close enough to feel real. The second step is separating your raises from your daily spending before you even see the money. When you get a raise, immediately redirect a fixed percentage, even just 40 or 50% of the new amount, into savings or debt payoff before your lifestyle has a chance to expand around it. This removes the decision entirely, so you're not relying on willpower against a psychological pull that's stronger than most people give it credit for. The third step is tracking not just what you spend, but why. When I reviewed my own 90 days, I started labeling purchases not by category, but by motive. Convenience, comfort, identity, boredom, guilt. That single shift told me more about my financial behavior than any app or spreadsheet ever had, because it stopped treating money as just numbers and started treating it as a mirror of what I actually needed emotionally in that moment. And the fourth step is choosing one single, specific comparison group to measure yourself against, ideally your own past financial position, rather than an undefined blur of people online or in your social circle. Progress against your own baseline 6 months ago is a stable, honest measurement. Progress against an algorithm's highlight reel is not. Here's the calm truth I landed on after those 90 days. The goal was never to eliminate financial stress completely, because some of it is simply the natural byproduct of living in an economy where costs rise quickly and incomes rise slowly. The goal is to stop mistaking that stress for personal failure. You're not bad with money because a $12 coffee broke your composure. You're human, living inside a system with thin margins and constant psychological pressure to prove you're doing well. Once you see that clearly, the fixes stop feeling impossible and start feeling like small, specific, doable adjustments. And that shift, from shame to clarity, is the actual peace of mind I was looking for on day one. I just didn't expect to find it by breaking a little first.